It's okay. It's just us.
Yeah.
Where am I? You're on the other edge. To your left. They want to see me.
That's what I heard her
For my
say.
emotional support.
Yeah.
All right, Assalamu alaikum, guys. I hope you guys are all doing well. Welcome to day 3 of our Career Exploration Conference, Social Science and Law Day. We would like to thank you for attending the session, and we hope you learned something valuable today. We would also like to thank the guest speakers who are here today despite their busy schedules. May Allah reward all of you. Before we get started, just reminders. I don't think this will be a problem, but like talking to a minimum and then keep the hallways clear. Yeah. Um, okay. Just a reminder, tomorrow is our last day of the career conference, and then it'll be on business and finance. So we also have 3 guest speakers coming again, and then it'll start at 6:30. And then we also have, so on Friday, August 4th, these are some of the upcoming classes. Imam Faad will be teaching us about our role models in the Quran, and then we'll bring donuts, so please scan your QR code to save a spot. And then we also have an amazing kickboxing class that will be launching August 19th. There is a course breakdown posted on our Instagram, so if you're curious, go ahead and check us out on MCA Youth. And then for our introductions, our first speaker is going to be Zahra Billow. She's a civil rights attorney and the executive director of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of CARE, which is also known as the Council on American Islamic Relations. Zahra is a graduate of UCSF College of Law, and she got her bachelor's from Long Beach State University as a political science major. The next speaker is going to be Omar Dean, who is a graduate of Cornell University with a degree in poli-sci analysis in management. He has previously been a council member for the city of Sunnyvale, and he is currently the vice mayor of Sunnyvale. And then our last speaker is Dr. Zohar Nurjan, who has received her bachelor's from CSU Sacramento in sociology with a minor in psychology. She also received her master's in education from UC Santa Cruz, as well as a PhD in sociology with an emphasis in critical race and ethnic studies and education. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. It feels weird that it's 7 o'clock, but it's very bright outside. And so it's a little bit disorienting because I'm used to being at events in this room when it's dark outside. But thank you all for joining us in the middle of the bright daylight outside. I'm very excited that there's air conditioning at the MCA and happy to spend the evening with you. So as Ayan mentioned, my name is Zahra Billow. I'm the executive director at CARE San Francisco Bay Area. And jumping right into it, like how did I get to where I am today and what I do? Frankly, I was a really difficult, bratty, argumentative child. Like that's what it was. Growing up in a South Asian home, my traditional options were, as you might imagine, doctor, first choice, engineer, second choice, business owner, third choice. But I was very argumentative. One very early example of this is that when it was time to do our dissections in biology class, I opted out. I was like, no, it's against my religion to cut up this frog. And they were like, oh, but it's for science. I was like, it's against my religion. And they were like, but no, it's against my religion. They tried again with a pig and it was like double haram, right? Like, you want me to harm an animal, you want me to be gross, and like pigs are haram. And I cited my religion, right? And I got out of it. So my parents and my family were like, you know what? Maybe she should be a lawyer. At a very early age, despite being argumentative and like just difficult at times, I also was very privileged. Like, I am the daughter of US citizens who came to the United States, who were able to find a middle class life, And we never really experienced discrimination in a very significant way. That was until 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, I remember my dad called the house and he said, make sure you and your mom stay indoors today. And the next day when I went back to school, I recall for one of the very few times in my life rethinking, is it safe for me to wear my hijab today? Do I need to wear a different color? I remember it was like a printed floral hijab and I thought, should I wear like black to tell my fellow Americans that I too am mourning what happened to this country? That was followed, of course, by imams and leaders in our community being rounded up by immigration, the FBI, raiding various charities. And I remember back then they would even come on campus. The campus administration had provided the class schedules of certain people to the FBI. And so the brothers would come out of class and the FBI would be waiting for them. So you take, a really argumentative, difficult child, then you show her all of the privilege she does have. Because yes, I worried briefly about whether or not I could wear my hijab safely today, but I also was never worried about getting sent to Guantanamo or being arrested for exercising my speech rights or facing any immigration consequences. You show her the privilege that she has. And then you show her a crisis that affects her country and her community. And what do you get? A civil rights lawyer. In my time in undergrad, I was really involved with student government. I participated in the MSA. I was MSA president. I was in the student government cabinet. So I had a lot of opportunities to practice my public speaking, to represent different groups, to even practice like different community organizing strategies. I remember when college tuition was going up, and it continues to go up. It's gone up every year since then. I organized with my student government colleagues as well as with people in labor organizing to say like, hey, we need to protect the human right to education. We need to make sure that education is accessible to everyone. I interned at a lot of different places. So I interned at CARE Los Angeles. I interned with the California Faculty Association. I built relationships really early on in my time in high school and college. I went on to law school. And then subhanAllah, I graduated in what they said was potentially the worst economy of that decade. For every law graduate out there, there wasn't a job, right? So sorry, for every 2 law graduates, there was 1 job. Those were the numbers in 2009. For every 2 law graduates, there was 1 job. So I had friends with better grades than me who were bartending, right? Who were waiting tables at restaurants, just trying to figure out how they were going to pay their bills. And there's something about Allah's mercy with how you may plan a certain thing. So I thought for a little while I would go work in plaintiff side law, but in the private practices. I thought I would work outside of the Muslim community. I actually never thought I would work inside the Muslim community. I was like, no, I don't want to work with those people full time. I can hang out with them in the evening. I can hang out with them on the weekends. I obviously care about their civil rights, but I never thought I would work in a Muslim organization. I had started to move all of my stuff back to my parents' house because I was like, oh, I graduated from law school, but I don't have a job. So I'm going to go live at home where I don't have to pay rent again. And this opportunity at CARE opened up. And so when CARE called, they said, look, we're a small organization at the time. At my office, which now has 20 people, I was just the second person on the staff at the time, right? And so I was doing all of the different jobs all at once. They said, you'll get to be a lawyer, but you'll also have to be a fundraiser. You'll also have to be a nonprofit manager. You'll also have to be a lobbyist. Can you do all of it? And I said, well, I don't know. And they said, and you'll get attacked by Islamophobes. And I said, that I know how to deal with. I've already dealt with it in college. They promised me that no single day would ever be boring. And I would say that that's true. Today, I've done a lot of things. I've worked with staff who are reaching out to elected officials, like our next speaker. I've worked with staff who have placed stories in the San Francisco Chronicle. I've supported casework today. And I've also looked at our budget numbers. We plan, but I would say that what's so important, or what worked for me, is think about what you're good at. Think about what you really enjoy. In my case, it was argumentation, right? And then think about how you can help people by doing it.
So I guess I'm going to go next. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And one day, inshallah, I'll be one of those elected officials that actually responds to her staff on time. But my name is Omar Dean. to jump into kind of, I think, the same prompt as to how I got here and why I got started in all of this, there's a longer answer that I'll say. I think the short answer, and it's actually kind of true, is I just grew up with a lot of sisters who are all friends with Zahra, and that really indoctrinates you quite quickly. But to go in even a little deeper, and I think that does a good job of summarizing a lot of the core trends, which I think are probably shared between all three of us up here, which is similar to what Zahra just mentioned, growing up in a post 9/11 world. So I was 3 when 9/11 happened. And so by the time I even had, I think, enough cognition to understand this concept of Islamophobia, it was already a very different landscape than the next day. And that's in part due to the work of people like Zahra and many others, right, who had combated Islamophobia on behalf of our whole community. But the political ramifications of those things persisted far after. And I think on top of that, the politics of our community fundamentally changed. And in a weird way, and this is how you know Allah is the greatest of planners, it strengthened our community as much as it hurt our community. Because when I grew up, and as I came to my own, it was here at MCA. It was walking these halls with my siblings, going to meetings here where they were talking about politics, where they were talking about trainings on how to deal with the FBI, on how to deal with racial profiling, on how to protest. I remember the first time I learned what to do if you get arrested was sitting right here, right? And so I think this really teaches you this fundamental concept of how in Islam, justice and community are one and the same, right? They really are tied together at the hip. That your community is only as strong as your ability to enact justice and your ability to do what's right. And so that got really ingrained into me at a young age. And I think also just everything about, well, what do you do for fun and what do you do, that really motivates you, also got tied up in politics, because some of my earliest memories were of going with my sisters up to San Francisco for protests about Iraq, about, Palestine, about Gaza. And so when I got into high school, it's kind of like a fish in water doesn't know it's in water. I didn't even know I cared about politics. I just thought I cared about things. And then I got more exposed to kind of the politics outside of our community around issues like housing affordability, around issues like civil rights, beyond just those that Muslims had to deal with. And that's when I got exposed to political campaigning. And so I was really fortunate in that in high school, I got to intern with campaigns. And then after doing that, I was really curious about what does it actually look like on the flip side when it comes to how the laws got passed. I actually did an internship with CARE. And while I was there, I got exposed to what that process of how laws get written are. And something that I realized is, and I don't say this disparagingly because I think CARE does such incredible and important work, and so do all these other legal organizations, but our society needs more than just that. Because on their best day, they have to work super hard to fight for that one person that's in crisis, to save that one person's life or job or their freedom. But someone who writes a law with a stroke of their pen can affect 1,000 people at once, can affect 10,000 people at once. And so when I was looking at that, I just thought, well, that's something I want to do, because we don't have enough people who care about us that are writing those laws. And so while I was in high school, I got exposed to other politicians who weren't Muslim, but who ran for office at a really young age and ran for office coming from communities that aren't normally represented. Things like the Asian community, things like the South Asian community. And so it kind of instilled in me this belief that, hey, maybe that's possible. And then through CARE again, I did MYLP, which is our Muslim Youth Leadership Program, which I honestly would encourage every person in this room to do or go on. You get to go to the state capitol and you get to experience what it's like to be in these different rooms of government where these decisions are happening. And it made me realize just how within reach all of these things are. And I think when we grow up outside of this system, when we grow up as one of those members of our society that's more typically on the menu than at the table, you don't realize it's within reach. And so getting to see people that ran at a really young age, getting to see other Muslims that were doing this work made me realize that this is something we can aim to. And I always assumed the reason that more people didn't run for office is because it was so difficult, that like running for office is impossible. You have to be super smart or super accomplished or super rich. And then I just realized, you know what, it's doable. But on top of that, the reason people don't do it is just that they don't do it. It's actually not that hard. And so I went to college, I studied public policy, and then afterwards, and this is, obviously luck as well, and I attribute a lot of it to Allah, but there was a position that was open and I saw it and I said, you know what? I want to run for that. I knew I wanted to run for a while. I had done a lot of work in politics, so I had learned a lot of those skills. But I just decided to throw my hat into the ring. And thankfully, with the support of a community like ours, I was able to win and continue on a lot of that work. So that's how I got into it. And I think the biggest lesson I would like everyone to take away from it is to realize that so many of these things that you think are just dreams are completely within reach. That if you just try it, you're actually so much more capable than you think you are, because other people do these things. And if they can do it, there really isn't any reason none of us can as well.
Salam. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. You know what's funny? It's full circle that the first time I learned what to do if I get arrested was when Zahra came to UC Santa Cruz and taught us, you know, what to do when the FBI comes knocking on your door. And that's when I learned about counter, you know, CVE and countering violent extremism programs. And yeah, anyways. SubhanAllah. No, thank you so much for your work. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Sahar Nurjan. So I'm currently a professor at San Jose State University in the Department of Sociology, and I teach in the Asian American Studies program. How I got here is actually very similar in the sense that, you know, from a very young age, I had this, you know, strong sense of justice inside of me where, and part of it comes from just my personality, but part of it also comes from growing up in a post 9/11 context. Right, understanding. I was around 4th, 5th grade when 9/11 happened, and you know, we watched it on TV. I was watching cartoons. We were off school at the moment, and you know, it just like every channel was the yeah, it was intense. And so I remember that sense of shame around our community. And I didn't particularly understand why. I was too young to understand why. I remember having actually a critique of what was going down in terms of like the wars and being told, you know, by some elders that, hey, like maybe you shouldn't voice your opinions, because I also was very much, you know, opinionated. Yeah, and then I just kind of stayed away from that side of my identity when it came to school, right? I'm someone who really loves learning. I really love school, and so I just kind of went on my journey, you know, following my parents' advice of being a doctor. And so, believe it or not, my major as an undergrad was actually biology. And then I quickly learned after my first semester, I actually even started my chem sequence and I was into it. But then it was only until I wanted to become an optometrist because my reasoning was like, hey, I really hate blood. Like, I just can't stand it. I don't know how I'm gonna be a doctor, but maybe the eyeballs don't have as much blood. And so obviously I had no idea. And so I interned in an optician clinic my first semester of college, which I really recommend you all do is if you're thinking about a career path, please find an internship to test it out. You know, shadow someone, figure out if you actually like it. College is the best time to do that. And so I quickly realized that this is so boring to me. It had no meaning in terms of like the physics of refractive lenses. I didn't really care. I was really interested in making a social impact, and that was something that kind of stayed with me. So I kind of explored. I took a lot of different classes. Alhamdulillah, I was in the honors program, so I was exposed to a lot of different kind of like perspectives, philosophies, and it just kind of filled my cup. Until finally, I took my first ethnic studies class in college, and it was for the first time that I started to understand. I was given tools to understand what was going on in society, especially in terms of 9/11. For the first time, I started to understand how power is constructed and how it shapes individual people's experiences. And so that was really a transformative experience, in addition to the fact that the text that we were reading, A Different Mirror by Ronald Takaki, who's a Japanese-American scholar, there was like 4 pages in his book on Little Kabul, which is Fremont, California, where I was born and raised. And I had no idea my whole entire life. At that point, I was like maybe 19 years old. I had no idea that I was living in an ethnic enclave when I was growing up. I just thought I had a lot of cousins around me. So alhamdulillah, I was like, it was such a transformative experience for me to read about my community in a text, right? Like a form of authority, right? To have like my community their experiences being written down through, you know, letters, right? SubhanAllah. And so I was like, this is not okay. I was like, why did I have to wait until college to learn about my community, from a textbook? And what about all the people who don't make it to college, right? When will they learn about their communities? And so I started to reflect about the kind of Eurocentric focus of curriculum, and why is it that students of color never get to learn about their experiences and their communities in their classrooms? So that's when I did an internship at Breakthrough Sacramento. It's a teaching preparatory program, and then also a middle school college preparatory program. So I taught 8th grade writing for a summer, and mashallah, it was amazing. The little middle school students are amazing. And I learned a lot about myself and just teaching, and learned that I really enjoy it, right? Being able to kind of guide people to growing is a really amazing experience, right? And so from there, I was still kind of like grappling with my major. At this point, I was like, well, I really love science, but I really love philosophy as well. Maybe I'll become a lawyer, And so then I started taking some psychology classes, and I was like, okay. But it was too individualistic for me. And so I took my first social class, and I fell in love. I was like, all right, this is it. And alhamdulillah, I had a really amazing sociology professor who introduced us to like a global lens, right? It was the first time I learned about racism, militarism, and capitalism from a global perspective. We talked a lot about the war on terror. We watched a lot of Noam Chomsky. And so he really opened up my perspective. And I left that class every single day, like just deeply moved. I was like, every single day I was frustrated because we were learning about so many inequalities in society. And I was like, why isn't anybody doing anything about this? This is so upsetting. And yet at the same time, I was like moved because this was something that I was yearning to learn about for such a long time. And so subhanAllah, from there, I ended up finishing my sociology degree, but I applied to PhD programs in education because as much as I love sociology and the critical tools that it gave me to analyze society, it didn't give me the tools to change society. And so I was going to education to hopefully figure out some kind of, specializing in critical pedagogy in order to figure out how to empower, facilitate empowerment for students that, then so that they can actually change society. And then quickly learned in grad school that, with its own kind of challenges, and that was education programs are oftentimes focused mostly on schooling, and, education for liberation is beyond schools. And so then I ended up getting my terminal master's degree in the PhD program and transferred to the sociology PhD program and finished my degree there. Sorry, this is a long story. But okay, I'll wrap it up. And then in the end, basically, during the pandemic, I went on the job market, which I can talk about this a little bit more later. But alhamdulillah, I was able to get a job at San Jose State. So yeah.
All right, thank you guys so much. That was amazing. So now we're going to be moving into our panel session. This is the QR code, so if you have any questions or anything that pops up, you can go ahead and scan it and ask, and then I'll ask for you. So the first question we have is, what is the best path to internships as a political science graduate?
Okay. I was about to say, I think all of us have some form of that degree. I'll jump in first. So that's a great question. And I think you made a great point, which is if there's something you're interested in, try and find an internship in it. Like that is, not only will you learn more about it, hope also, and be open to this, if it's something that turns out you don't like it very much, that's the best way to learn that, because you need to try a bunch of things to figure out what it is you don't like so you have a better sense of what it is you do like. Now, the best way to find internships in political science, here's the really great thing, which is that if you know you want to run for office one day, which I think everyone should also consider. I think a lot of people, they say, well, I don't like attention, or, oh, there are other people who will do that. I just want to like help from behind. But ask yourself, like, why? Why not be that person that actually makes the decisions? Because that's what we need. And if it is, a little bit more scary, a little bit more hard, honestly, you'll probably get ajr for the amount of sacrifice you have to make because you're doing it on all of our behalf. And so if that's the type of career you want to explore, the secret is that campaigns are actually desperate for people. Like if you run for office, let's say here in Santa Clara, you have roughly, actually, how many people are in Santa Clara? Like 50, 70,000 maybe? I don't know. I'm gonna guess 100,000 people live here. You have roughly like 40 to 50,000 households who live like in the city, and of that, maybe like 30,000 are registered to vote. That's 30,000 doors that need to be knocked in order to convince them to vote for you, right? One person can't do all that. So all of these candidates, anyone that you've ever seen on TV, they want as many people as they can get to help them win. And so if you go and reach out to any campaign, I guarantee you, they will like give you a big hug and say, yes, please come intern for us. So that's one way to get internships, just reach out. The second way is look beyond just what might seem obvious. So if you look on TV and you see someone really well known and recognizable, sure, you could go intern with them, but I would encourage you to also just look around as to what your specific interests are. If it's in politics, figure out which policies you really care about. You know, if you care a lot about technology and the ethics behind tech, there are some politicians who are working a lot more on that than others. Reach out to their offices, because if you work for them, you're going to learn way more about that niche subject that you care about. If you care a lot about, you know, Palestine or about Kashmir, or about what's happening out there, there are probably people who are working a lot more on that field than others. Just go online, Google, find them, and reach out to them. People's contact information is really easily available. And a secret weapon that you have before you graduate college, and honestly, if you're in high school, you have even more so, is if you email anyone, they are so likely to respond to you, because I get a lot of emails from a lot of different people. Whenever I see anyone that's really young, I'm like, what the heck? Like, you took time out of binging Netflix to email me? Like, that's somebody I'm gonna care a lot more about responding to. And I'll probably grab coffee with them. I'll meet with them if they wanna meet, and tell them as much as I can. So if there's anything you really dream of doing, find a person that's doing it, find their contact information online and email them, and I guarantee you they'll meet with you and help you find that internship. And they'll probably give you mentorship as well and make you even better.
In case you heard me say, Omar was the most recent person with the political science degree on the. It's not because I'm ageist, it's because old school, I would be like, well, send them an email and look for the form on their website. But I realized that things are changing. And so we were just talking earlier about the best way to reach students, by the way, is for us to like DM them on Instagram. And so I'm just cognizant that I need to like update my own set. +1 to everything Omar said. Vice Mayor Omar Dean said, mashallah. What I would add is that the additional secret weapon that you have if you are in college or high school is summer break. Right? So like use your summer break, use your winter break, plan ahead. So like now is not a good time to ask for a summer 2023 internship, but it is a good time to say, oh, you know what? Like I have 6 weeks off in the winter. Can I get coffee with you? Can I sit down and talk to you? Here's my resume and cover letter. Would you consider me for an internship? So plan ahead. The other thing about planning ahead for politics is next year is an election year. And so to Omar's point about they're desperate for help, the sooner you get in the door before they're flooded with more emails, before every Muhammad, Ali, and Joe emails them and says, I want an internship, the more likely you are to stand out.
Also, just jump in. Do you know of any nonprofits that work in civil rights that hire interns?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. CARE is recruiting for interns. Our fall internship program application deadline is August 11th. And so if you want to spend your fall semester with us, the application deadline is August 11. All of the instructions to apply are on our website. If you want to plan ahead for winter or spring, get your application in early to stand out. And not just us, right? Like in this area, you have Asian Law Alliance, which is based in San Jose. You have ACLU of Santa Clara County. You have Siren, which does immigration work and based in San Jose, Silicon Valley Debug. I mean, the list is really long. And so in addition to promoting, of course, my favorite organization and where Omar and I likely first met, if not through his sisters, check out all of the local offerings. Mashallah, we have a lot of options in this region.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think internships, you can't go through college passively, right? So a lot of the times, these internships are not like screaming at you. Like, you have to actually look for them, right? There was a lot of the internships that I did. I actually did an internship with the Criminal Justice Legal Foundation, which I did not know at the time that they were pro death penalty, and was horrified once I figured it out and quickly left them. When I was considering being a lawyer, but you have to actually look through those listservs, right? When they send you those like career listings, or you know, on the Career Center, I guess Instagram now, maybe that's a thing. But you actually have to actively look for these things, because they won't just come through your email.
I'm going to jump in with one more thing, and it's going to be really bold, but I'm just going to say it. Where if you're in the audience here right now and you know you really want to get an internship soon, Zahra knows a lot of people, like a lot of people. You should just come up afterwards and talk to her. And I know she really likes to help people too. So yeah, don't not come up to her.
Happy to help. Happy to help. Would love to have all of you in a pair, but also if you're thinking about other places and you want ideas, come to me. I'm happy to connect you with people, but I would do the same with my co-panelists. They know as many, if not more, than I do.
All right. The next question, what is the most fulfilling aspect of your career?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I have such a fulfilling job. Alhamdulillah. I get to do whatever I want to do in a sense, and my research area is around the topic that I choose, right? So I ended up doing my dissertation on how religion is racialized and how anti-Muslim racism shapes the experiences of belonging and civic engagement for Muslim students and immigrants. And alhamdulillah, like, creativity is a really important part of you know, how I find work meaningful, right? And so being able to determine what I want to study and the parameters of a study is really important to me. And then being able to teach students every day, right? And being able to expose them to ideas that will fundamentally change their ideas, especially because I teach general education classes, and a lot of students are from engineering, computer science, and you know, all these kind of STEM areas are not traditionally exposed to social sciences. And for the first time, I get to, you know, expose them to things about like racial capitalism, settler colonialism, and they're like, their mind is blown sometimes. So alhamdulillah, I think the most fulfilling part is, you know, twofold. Is one, determining my own research agenda, and then also being able to teach students and seeing them kind of open up their perspectives.
So there's, alhamdulillah, like one of the things about really dedicating your career to your purpose and your mission is that there is so much that is rewarding. I would offer two things. One is the ability to help people and make a difference in their lives, right? Like to say, wow, like the FBI is at your door, I'm going to call them on your behalf and we are going to protect you. Or the police violated your rights, we are going to escalate this to the local elected officials. And so whenever I can see us make a difference in someone's life, not because they were helpless or voiceless or anything like that, but rather because they were marginalized, they were targeted, they weren't connected to the right tools and opportunities. And so when we can fix something like that for one individual, I always think about like, wow, we've made a difference in their life. We've made them safer, more comfortable, and inshallah more connected to their community. But we've also hopefully empowered their families and their communities. Whenever we're training new attorneys on what it means to protect someone visited by the FBI, it's not just about protecting the individual that was visited, it's everyone in their circle who the FBI would have asked them about. So that's one of the things I would offer. The other thing, honestly, is sitting next to Omar, mashallah. No, but like sincerely, right? So I've been at CARE for about 14 years now. And our youth programs are one of our biggest investments. We just came back from the Muslim Youth Leadership Program, which Omar referenced. It's our weekend-long, 4-day intensive in Sacramento. It's in its 17th year. The students arrive on Thursday morning. They take a train out at 6 a.m. and then they spend the next 4 days, like all of them, 16 hours a day together. They pray Fajr. They do all of their prayers together. But then they also go to the Capitol and they sit in the same seats that elected officials sit in, and they get to feel what it feels like to write the laws that Omar is talking about. And so what I mean when I say it's really rewarding to sit next to Omar is he's one of several young elected officials from our community who we are now seeing rise up in the ranks of political impact who came through our programs, right? So Omar is one of them, Maimuna Afzal,
who sits on the Santa Clara County Board of Education. She is the highest ranked elected muhajjaba in this state, right? So when you think about all of the Muslims elected to office, she holds the highest rank, and she is the only muhajjaba at that rank. And both of them are graduates of our programs. And so humble brag a little bit, but when we see that the impact of these investments, that is incredibly rewarding because, my gosh, waking up at like 5 a.m. to like wake up the high school students to be like, hey, it's time to go downstairs and pray Fajr or tuck in your shirt because today you're being an elected official. And then you see like 10 years later, like, wow, like they are going to have more impact than any individual will because of the level of where they are writing their policies.
Oh, that was really sweet. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. It's funny, I was actually going to give an answer that was a little bit similar. So I'm going to give two answers as well. One is something that I have experienced, and then the second is going to be something I haven't yet, but really hope to. And I'm going to start with the second one because it ties so neatly into yours, which is similar to what Zahra just mentioned. I was inspired to run because I saw the people above me. You know, actually going to MYLP, that weekend is when I like literally said to myself, I'm like, the moment I graduate college, I'm going to run for office. Like it's what threw me over the edge, which I reference very often and probably sounds like a broken record now for her, but it's true. And the other thing that really convinced me, and I referenced it earlier, was seeing people who had run and were successful. Because it's a really scary thing to do, honestly, to decide what to do with the rest of your life. All of you in the audience are probably in that stage right now, and you know that stress. You know how scary it is about the idea of not doing well enough or the idea of failing your parents. I was there too, and so taking everything that you've spent all your time on with school and grades and getting into a good university and then risking it on something that not a lot of people do, really, it seems scary. And if you think you're going to fail, then you're never going to do it, right? You're just going to go with the safe path. And so I saw people who ran for office under the age of 23, under the age of 25. I saw people from minority backgrounds who ran. And because I saw that they had done it and were successful, I was willing to accept that reality that I could do it. And so I haven't experienced it yet because I'm still pretty new. But what I think is going to be one of the most fulfilling ones is one day knowing that there might be a Muslim person who grew up in our community, who was very young, who saw me able to do it and decided themselves to get into politics. I think that is when I'll know that like that little story arc is complete. But the thing that I haven't experienced it yet, inshallah, and hopefully it's one of y'all that decides to run for office. But the thing that I have experienced that's really fulfilling is the chance, kind of like Zahra said, the chance to help people. And so one of the biggest things that I ran on when I ran was about housing affordability. But specifically within my district, we have a huge number of mobile home residents. And it's a community that not a lot of people pay attention to, but mobile home parks are rife with abuse. You know, if you own a mobile home, you don't own the land that it's on. You need to put it somewhere. You know, you can't just put it in the middle of the MCA parking lot. So you have to pay rent still to put your mobile home somewhere. And that rent typically does not get nearly as much protection as other forms of housing. The state categorizes the land that mobile homes are on as commercial land, not residential. And that sounds like a lot of legalese, but really that means that all of the protections that the state and that our governments offer to renters and apartments don't apply to mobile home residents because they're on commercial land, right? So they treat it like they would someone renting out a 7-Eleven or someone renting out an office space. And so all of these residents are being charged money, and the amount that they're getting charged is being increased like crazy every single year, right? It is ripe with abuse. And all of these residents who are already on the fringes of our socioeconomic, ladder are being put into positions where they can't guarantee they'll have housing within the next year or within the next few months. And they're really, really scared for their future. And that's a real thing. And so within the first few months of my term, one of the biggest things we did is we passed a form of tenant protections for mobile home residents, where we were able to cap their rent at 3% every year, the rent increases. And if they decided they wanted to sell their home, the new residents were also capped at 5% higher rates than the ones before. Versus before we had done this law, a new resident could come in and be charged almost as much as double what the previous resident was being charged. And so yesterday I was actually out in my district and talking to some mobile home residents, and they told me how that law had saved their housing, how they wouldn't still be in the city if we hadn't passed that. And so knowing that you get to make that kind of impact on people's lives is deeply fulfilling, and I'm actually deeply grateful that I get the chance to do that.
All right, mashallah. So the next question, I'm going to combine into one. What is the work-life balance for your profession? And then what does a typical work day look like for you?
I will say one of the hardest things about a career that you care so deeply about, where people depend on you, and it's core to your being, is that work-life balance is challenging. To give you a sense of where I'm struggling with it, I started work today at 9 a.m. and I probably have work to do even when I get home at 9 p.m. I am as tired as any person working in a big law firm, any person working at another job that they want to succeed at. The difference for me is that I consider my work a form of worship. So when I start my day, I make the intention that, Ya Allah, I am doing this work for you. Like, keep me sincere in it, make me successful in it, guide me as I move through it. And so I'd like to believe that, inshallah, it is accepted as an act of worship. And still, caring for my body, caring for my family, and maintaining my sustainability long term are also acts of worship, right? And so over the years, now many years, I've had an opportunity to practice my boundaries. To give you a sense, I knew that today was going to be a really long day. I knew that the next few days were going to be a really long days. And so I planned ahead and I took part of Monday off, right? And I said, okay, I'm going to sleep until 11 a.m. on Monday. I'm going to do the laundry. I'm going to just do nothing, like not check my email, nothing, until it's time for me to start my day. And I'm just going to work a half a day on Monday because my body, my family have rights over me. So what's it like? It's hard. It's really hard when you care about what you're doing. It's hard not to pick up the phone at 10 p.m. when someone calls you for help. It's hard not to get started really early when you're like, but if I just start at 5 a.m., then like I'll get a head start. We have to practice. They would tell me when I was first starting out that it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm not a runner, so I don't know if I'm actually using that correctly. The point is, you don't want to burn out very early on. You may think, oh, if I do all these things, I'll make such a huge difference. But if I'm not managing my bills and I don't have a home, I'm not going to make a difference for anyone in 5 years, right? If I make myself sick because I worked too hard without boundaries, I'm not going to last 20 or 30 years in this work. The challenges that we are working through, and I believe this is true for all of the work that we're doing, are multi-generational challenges. Racism existed well before we were born. Islamophobia exists from the moment that Islam is introduced to society, right? As is like unchecked capitalism and so many other things that we're fighting against. And so I'm not going to fix it all by myself, but for me to keep working on it for as long as it's going to take, I also have to make sure that I'm working on myself in the process.
I think it's such a cliche, but like if you love the work that you do, you don't work for a day, and it's still hard. We still work quite a bit. I think our sectors are definitely some of the most draining in terms of how much time you need to put in. But if you're doing public interest work, if you're doing political work, if you're doing that kind of stuff, you're probably not doing it because it's the most lucrative. I think we can all be honest on that, but because you really care about it. And what I can tell you is if you go into this line of work and you do care about it from the get-go, you're going to be deeply fulfilled. And one of the things that I remember when I was talking to people when I was really young, okay, I'm not that old, when I was younger, was that I always thought the life I wanted was one where I was doing something that I cared so much about that it was the first thing I thought about when I woke up and the last thing I thought about before I go to sleep. And the first time I really got to truly experience that was on the campaign. And I still haven't worked nearly as hard as I ever had during a campaign. And I look back and I think of it as like the funnest time of my life because you really just spend the whole day living out something you've dreamed about doing. And so if you decide that you want to run for office or go into this, or honestly do something completely different, whether that be starting a startup or something equally incredible but intimidating, you're going to find so much joy in doing it, even if you're working really hard. And so, yes, I think we all work really long hours, but some days it'll feel like that, and some days it actually won't, and it'll go by really quickly. And the trick is on the days that it does feel like that, you need to find systems that work for you. That's what Zahra was talking about. And you need to find ways of figuring out why it's not feeling that way and changing your systems accordingly. Because sometimes, other people know that we all care so much about what we do and find ways to use that to their benefit, right? To extract more labor out of you, to get you to do things. And the advice I'll give you is be really true to yourself and be able to set boundaries. And if it's work that isn't hitting for you, don't be afraid to pivot into something that is more correctly in your lane or feels more like what it is that you want to be doing. And that's how you find that work-life balance.
Yeah, so I agree that work-life balance in academia is very challenging. But alhamdulillah, I think when I was a grad student, it was completely non-existent. Just like every day from literally 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., I would be at a coffee shop with a friend just working on the dissertation. And, I'd come home, take breaks, but be back at the coffee shop. And, I worked really hard. And alhamdulillah, with like Allah's help, it was an intense time period where I think working hard was essential in a way, because it then prepped me to then take a break now. So for example, I was able to work on getting publications in order when I was a grad student, so that once I got my job as a tenure track professor, I actually can sit back and just, let the papers go out into the pipeline. And SubhanAllah, it's for the first time, I think when you're a grad student, there's also that idea of you don't know if you're gonna get a job, right? So you're working so hard because you don't know if there's a sense of security at the end of the day. You have to maybe have to prepare for being an industry PhD, or maybe I'm gonna be an academic. I'm not sure where I'm gonna go. And so you're just kind of constantly on the grind. And it took time when I first got my job to let go of that sentiment a little bit, to have some of this work-life balance and have joy like this little kid, it's fun a lot. But I had really good mentors that helped me get to where they would ask me hey, what are you doing for fun? And I'd be working on my paper, and they'd be no, what are you, they're outside of work, what are you doing for fun? And I was reading a book, It's fun a lot, but it's been nice. Over time, I've been able to kind of take a step back and be okay, at the end of the day, I'm still getting a salary. I have to teach these classes. So I'm gonna set a time limit on how much I'm gonna prep for the classes, and I'm gonna call it, after that. And I had to also come to terms with that. This is a career, right? That I'm so passionate about these ideas. Sometimes I just want to do all the projects all at once. And I have to remind myself that, okay, I have 10 plus years to work on each of these projects, inshallah.
So I think some just very how do you apply this, right? First, naming that we are at a masjid. It's so important that you center your intentions in all of the work that you do, because when it gets tough, you want to remember why am I doing this? And I'm doing this for Allah and Allah alone, not for glamour, not for money, not for success, not even because I think I control the outcome. I am doing this as an act of worship, right? The second thing I would offer, I'm going to start numbering, but I don't have I don't know where I'm going with the numbers. But the second thing I would offer is make sure that you are holding fast to the practice of your faith. So you cannot change the world if you are not praying 5 times a day, right? If you are not good to your parents. Omar and I both need to call our moms today, I think, right? Zahra, you were going to call yours as well.
I just saw her today, actually.
Okay, perfect. Right? So you cannot change the world if you are not praying 5 times a day, if you are not fasting, if you are not reading Quran on a regular basis. I remember when I was a young activist, we would say that sometimes we stay at a masjid program so late at night and then we miss Fajr, right? Or we go to a protest in the middle of the day and we're going to free Palestine, but we didn't pray Dhuhr, right? So make sure that you center your religious practice, because you can't say that you're doing something for Allah and then neglect what He's requiring you to do. That is where your success happens, right? So your intentions, your worship, and I'll say a little bit more about worship. So there's the required actions, right? And then there's the things that bring you closer to Allah. So reading Quran on a regular basis,
praying tahajjud when you are able, fasting optionally when you can, spending your money in a halal way, right? So like if you are spending your money in haram ways on the weekend, like what are you really doing? Making sure that you are in some sort of study circle. And right, and that can look like a regular halaqah, it can look like the Sirat Pathways program, it can look like just having someone that you check in with on a weekly basis. Like my mentors are the ones that will say, like, when was the last time you read Quran? Right? Like, how is your practice going? Do you want to fast together today? Oh, you're feeling angry. Like maybe we don't process our anger in that way, right? So make sure that you're surrounding yourself. So study circles and then surround yourself with good people who can say, hey, I saw that picture of you on Instagram. Maybe you should take it down, right? Like, let's be real. Like we have to have these conversations because sometimes we forget, right? And we need to be reminded. That's on the religion side, right? So what's your intentions, what's required, and then the things that make you better and stronger. The second piece of this is take care of your bodies. Omar was 3 when 9/11 happened. Sahar was in like 5th grade, you said? 11. I was 17. So like I'm counting down to 40 right now, and I can tell you like what you eat matters. How much you sleep matters, right? Like you know that you put a bunch of junk into your body, you are not great the next day. You stay out late, miss Fajr, you're not great the next day. It sounds really cliche to just be telling you to take care of your bodies before your bodies are like, "Ooh, what are you doing?" They will slow you down. Like there are days where if I don't answer my phone for several hours, my friends know to check on me. In most cases, what's happened is I have fallen asleep because I have worked myself to exhaustion, right? So take care of your health. And it affects you in the present and it affects you long term. That's your physical health. And the last thing I'll say is take care of your mental health, right? It is a lot to take on the responsibility of I am going to be like an influence on all of these students at San Jose State, or this law and policy that affects the renters in my city depends on me, or the FBI is at my client's door again for the 3rd time. Like what is happening, right? That's a lot to take on. And so in that regard, who you choose to be your friends matters. You want people who lift you up, people who encourage you, people who celebrate you, people who you can eat ice cream with, because none of us are drinking alcohol, right, to decompress. It's ice cream or cake or dates and fruit, whatever it is, right? But like stay in the halal, but find good people to spend your time with. Talk to a therapist, right? Like that, I think I didn't start seeing a therapist until I was in my 30s. And one thing I always say is like, I wish I had started in my 20s. You just need a safe container to laugh and cry and scream, and everything is confidential, right? So find a therapist. And then trust in Allah, right? So it comes back to faith, is that we do the absolute best we can, but we start with Allah, we take care of our bodies, and we take care of our mental health. And then when you do have to work a 12-hour day or a 16-hour day and someone's dependent on you, you're right. In most cases, it's not going to feel like work, but it's also not going to take its toll over time, inshallah.
All right. The next question, if someone is already in their professional career, how can they get involved with the political side of things? Or how can you run for office with another career?
I think I can jump in on that one. So it's a great question, and it's actually one that's very common, because if you are, lower down on the political totem pole, most political positions still require you to have some form of a day job. So not all elected positions are full-time, actually. And so my position, being on the city council for a smaller city, and Sunnyvale isn't small, but like compared to San Francisco or Oakland, is actually part-time. And so you still need to have a day job on top of it. I actually have a day job myself working for the city of San Jose, doing policy work with them. And so it is very common for people who are involved to have day jobs. It's very doable. In terms of how you actually do that, the best way to get involved in politics is, one is kind of what we talked about earlier, working for campaigns. A lot of campaigns for 2024 are starting right now. Okay, a lot of them have already started. So find a candidate you really care about, go onto their website, and there's gonna be a form there for when their events are or to sign up for things. And sign up, go volunteer for a candidate you care about. And if you care about them, you'll actually find it really fulfilling, but you'll also learn a lot. And most importantly, you'll get connected to people. Politics is all about building connections. You know, you don't need to be the most charismatic. You can be really awkward. And sometimes people that are like, you're like, how on earth did you get elected? You're this awkward. But that's like a good sign that literally anyone can do it. But you just need to be willing to go and meet these people. And so campaigns are a great way to get connected. One thing that really shocked me is how small the world of politics is. It really is the same people in all of these different circles. You get to know so many of them. You see them everywhere. So if you go to any one of these events, you're probably going to meet a lot of really important and really influential people, and then ask to get coffee with them, and they'll show you the playbook. They'll show you how these things are done. They want to build connections as well. And then the other thing you can do is, if you know you really want to run for office, I would suggest starting with either a city council or a school board position, or just wherever you're, whatever you care most about. If you care a lot about students, yeah, school board. If you care a lot about city issues, city council. If you care a lot about, the water that we drink, there's a water board, not the types that CARE deals with, a different type. But never mind. Or was it? But there are all of these different government entities that deal with really niche topics. If you care a lot about one of them, run for it. And the way that you get involved with one of those is, at least for the city council level, every city has these things called commissions. And city commissions are made up of unelected folks, people from that city who are appointed to the commission and do work on different policy areas. And it's meant to be for regular community members. And so Sunnyvale has, actually I should know this off the top of my head, I think we have around 10 to 15 commissions. Things that range from our arts commission, which oversees art in public places, to planning commission, which figures out what gets built where. Apply for one of these commissions. And if you get onto it, you get to learn a lot about policy, but also you'll build a resume that people will look at when you run for office. And so most people that get elected to city councils have served on a city commission first, and that's the best way to break into these circles.
Okay, next question. How do you balance religion and civil rights, especially when some views in our religion are not seen as complying to today's social ideologies?
Because I guess they won't, just kidding. Actually, and this is a very good question. What's funny is, right after I got elected, I still remember I got invited to go speak at a different masjid at West Valley to students who were really young. And and it was like, this was over Zoom, it was like 40 different students. One of them was like 12, and they asked me that exact question, or they were like, I think theirs was, how do you balance views on abortion with having to get like the Democratic Party? And I was like, first of all, where is this 12-year-old spending their time? Good Lord. Secondly, I was not ready for like the curveball questions at this like conversation with middle schoolers. But it does go to show that this is a really common thing that people deal with. So you're not the first. And it's something I thought a lot about too when I was in high school, because you're learning all of these issues, and then you want to get involved in politics. And quite frankly, we live in the Bay Area. It's very democratic. It's very progressive. There are a set checklist of different issues that people expect you to have certain stances on. But the reality is, when you actually go into it, politics, as much as it's about knowing people, it's also about messaging. It's about communications. And so you can still be true to every one of your ideals and get elected, even if they don't, even if they go against the norm, whether that be on things like LGBTQ issues or abortion or Palestine or, anything, even if you feel different on housing or on transportation, right? And the way you go about it, first of all, is never lie. I know people say politicians lie a lot, but the reality is you can never actually tell a direct lie, because if you do, you're gonna get caught eventually, and people aren't gonna trust you. And trust is the most important thing. And so stay true to your views, but also be willing to express them. You'll find that actually, and this is something I realized when I was running that I found to be really profound, people won't care as much about the exact thing that you said. Sure, if you run for president or something like that, they're going to watch every single word that you do. But for the most part, we're not at that level. Nobody's going to remember every single word that you said. But what they're going to connect with, beyond how you made them feel, is also they're just looking to see that you understand their life and their experience. That's all we want from our leaders. We want someone who gets it, right? Where if I am scared that I'm not going to have a roof over my head in a month because I'm making, bare minimum wage, or I'm, an immigrant who's undocumented and I'm really scared about getting deported. Actually, well, that's a bad example because if you're running for office, you're going to talk to voters. But if you're, talking to somebody that's really struggling, they're not going to care if you understand one specific law really well. They're going to care that you have their back, right? And so look for ways to connect with people on what's real for them, because everybody has things that they really care about. And if you're talking to them about those things, they're going to remember it, and they're going to remember you, and they're going to vote for you. And so when it comes to the specific issues, yes, the Democratic Party, to get their endorsement, they're looking for certain things. You can play the politics. There are ways around that. But in reality, what's core to all of this work is just being real to yourself and understanding how to connect with others on what's real to them. And the rest of it falls by the wayside in a lot of ways.
Okay, this question,
Should I
how do
actually-
you?
Sorry, can I actually comment on that one?
Yes. I was like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, my bad. I just wanted to add with a different take on it, not the, I just wanted to add that I think what's really important, the way that I bring not only faith, but then also just like religion in general to the classroom is that I teach Intro to Asian American Studies, right? And so when you think about that, what groups do you think about? What ethnicities? What kind of Asians? East Asians. Does anyone think about Indians, Pakistanis? Does anyone think about Arabs or Iranians or Afghans? Not really, right? And so for me, what I do is in my classroom, because I have the ability to change my curriculum the way that, academic freedom, we do like 2 weeks on the war on terror, and we talk about how, West Asia broadly, South Asia included, Central Asia included, how they're also part of this larger kind of conversation about, how the United States has affected these communities with the same systems of power, right? Like really integrating, Muslims are not just like this exception. They've been part of, their experiences are part of the larger fabric of the American story. And so introducing students to the ways that Muslim Americans have experienced racism, not just post 9/11, but throughout, history, really kind of broadens their perspective to also consider how, redefining what Asian American means, but then also how Muslim Americans are just like any other kind of group in this society. And then the other thing I'll just add is that I recently started wearing hijab, and I started wearing it actually during this particular Ramadan. And before that, to give you context, the semester starts in spring semester starts in, when does it start, Hada? I can't remember. January. Losing my mind. So it starts in January. Ramadan happened in March, April. And so we had spring break. So, a lot of the weeks passed by. I wasn't wearing hijab. Spring break, Ramadan starts. I walk into class with my hijab on. And subhanAllah, the students are just like, right? and I'm just like, what's up? How's everyone doing? Just my usual kind of like, oh, how was your spring break? And they're just like staring at me, and I'm like, so is no one gonna say anything about my new haircut? And then and then they just are like, oh, we don't know what to say. And so alhamdulillah, we have a whole conversation about why I started wearing it, what it means to me. And it was in that moment where I was like, hey, it's none of your business, but I want to share with you because this is an opportunity for you to ask me any questions that you may have if you see someone wearing hijab, right? And I made it clear, I'm I'm not an expert, but this is my personal experience. And subhanAllah, a lot of them in my evaluations afterwards, they were like, wow, that humanized you, right? And it allowed us to then bring our spirituality into the classroom. We never thought that was possible to be because the way that academia works is you completely take, it has to do with the history of the Enlightenment and secular education or whatever, but they completely forego this idea that students can have spiritual lives, right? And it has a lot of implications for the resources on campuses as well for the Muslim students. But I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's really important as educators too to kind of like bring our full selves to the classroom, right? And it was a unique opportunity that, alhamdulillah, went well.
Omar's answer was great, and now we have additions. What struck me about your story with the 12-year-old is, I don't know if you heard me say it under my breath, but when you asked the question, I was like, okay, it was just a matter of time, because every time we have a conversation or a panel on activism, this question comes up. And what strikes me is it doesn't come up in most other panels. And yet, if you look around our community, and I'm not passing judgment, but I'm being a little bit judgy, there are quite a few people in our community who work at banks, who sell mortgages, who work at Lockheed, make weapons, right? Who work for law enforcement and are violent with people. And the list goes on. And so the question of like, will you face a moral dilemma in your career should come up for everyone. And yet, most people aren't asking it in their other jobs. Like if you work at Amazon and they are abusing their workers in the factory or developing surveillance equipment, I don't know, is that better or worse than supporting civil rights for LGBT members of the community? Right? Like, I think our values are out of proportion and we focus on a couple of things and we make that really big when there are a lot of people in our community who made their money in ways that are far worse, right? Like they actually got rich making weapons at Lockheed Martin, which is doing what? Like dropping bombs on Gaza. But we don't ever ask the engineers, well, what are you going to do about a moral dilemma? Like, how are you going to be a successful engineer? Like, we don't do that, right? How many people are making their money selling mortgages? Like actually selling interest-based loans, which is like one of the worst things in our faith, helping the banks get rich as our communities get poorer. We don't ask them, like, how do you work at Wells Fargo or Quicken Loans or like whatever else? We focus on a couple of things almost disproportionately. And that's not to say that you're not going to face moral dilemmas in civil rights work or in political work or even in academia. You will. Come back to why you're doing the work, right? Make sure that you are connected to good people who are going to say, hey, like, why did you say it this way? Or could we think about it this way? Or giving our politicians, our Muslim politicians, the benefit of the doubt, like, ask, what was your political strategy here, right? We don't do that enough, and we get scared, and as a result, we miss out on being at the tables where very important decisions are made.
All right, so I think we're going to end with this question, just to give you guys a few minutes to network in the end before Salah. The question says, how do you feel safe in your line of work while working on any human rights issues, such as like supporting Palestine? Have you ever felt that someone from the government was spying, or did you ever feel unsafe yourself?
We believe as Muslims that no harm comes to us unless Allah wills it. No good comes to us unless Allah wills it. And whatever comes to us, Allah knows better than we do. There was a couple of years ago, and there continues to be a crisis at our border. There were migrants who were coming from South and Central America to cross over into the US via San Diego. And they were doing it again across the border. And US Border Patrol was violently attacking them, right? I'm talking about men, women, and babies. And these are people who walked hundreds of miles on foot. And if you're sitting here and your first reaction is, well, why are they trying to come to the country illegally? Like, think about what it takes to put yourself through that, right? And may Allah protect us from ever having to forcibly relocate anywhere. And so they're coming across the border and they're being attacked. And so we joined an interfaith gathering that said, we're going to go and we're going to bear witness to what is happening at the border. And so several hundred of us, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, atheists, we gathered at one of the churches in San Diego, and we prepared for what it was going to be like. If you've never been to the border, I'll tell you about it briefly. It's a very militarized zone. So on the Mexico side, you can come all the way up to the border, but on the US side, right, miles of it are blocked off. And so you're crossing into federal land, like you're going to be confronted by various forms of law enforcement. And we're like Some of us are holding our tasbeehs and doing dhikr. Some people are singing. It's like a jolly old group of interfaith activists, right? Putting our lives on the line. And there are no like resources or amenities there, right? So like you don't know when you're going to use the restroom. If you get arrested, you don't know where you're going to get taken. And so we're just like, we've locked arms and we're marching towards the border, and we're confronted by US Border Patrol. And it's like, we take a, you know, we step forward, they step forward, we step forward, they step forward, right? And it's this like dance of sorts, right? And they're saying like, stop being violent. And we're like, we don't have any weapons. We're singing and praying. Like, you're the ones with the guns and the batons. And I remember at a certain point, like, we're face to face with them, right? And to give you a sense, like, I'm here and this is the Border Patrol, right? And it's like this, like dozens of people. We've got many rows deep, and they've got their riot gear. So that's their shields, their batons, their guns. And we know that they can do whatever they want, and they will not be held accountable. Law enforcement on the streets of Santa Clara is not held accountable for the violence that they commit against communities of color. We are at the border protesting, right? And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're going to break my face, and then my mom is going to get mad at me. How am I going to get married without any teeth? I've made arrangements with a friend who, you know, has the bail money if I get arrested. She knows who she's supposed to call. And I'm just like, Ya Allah, like, we are doing this for your cause, right? Like, we are doing this because there are oppressed people on the other side. I am a US citizen. I am able-bodied. I have the money for bail. My mom will get mad at me, but she will forgive me. And maybe somebody will marry me without teeth, right? Like, who knows? But I have all of this privilege, and I'm putting my trust in Allah. And there's something about like that memory for me that is so core, because you're coming up against someone who represents the most powerful government in the country and who will not be held accountable. But when you can come back to, no harm comes to me unless Allah wills it, and if He does, there was something in it that I did not know. You may love something and it is bad for you, and you may hate something and it is good for you. And it makes you so powerful in that moment to be like, I am staring down the barrel of a gun. And you know what? I'm going to walk out of here just fine. To give you a comical twist to that ending, I went there that day ready to be arrested. I had been arrested before. I was going to engage in civil disobedience. Everybody around me got arrested. And I didn't. And I went willing to be arrested. I was willing to risk my physical safety. I was willing to take on the risk of an arrest. And it wasn't in my destiny that day to be arrested. And when you can come back to this, like, Ya Allah, like, nothing happens without your permission. Yes, you may be afraid at times, but you will also find courage, right? Knowing that nothing could happen to me. I am more likely to be injured by one of my cats scratching me because I like to roughhouse them than a Zionist, because like, I am that clumsy, and Allah would will it for me a different way. And so come back to that often, right? Come back to that when, if you're an engineer and you're sitting here and you're like, how is this relevant to me? When you need to ask to take time off to go to Jama'ah prayer, and you're like, oh, they're going to fire me. No. Your risk is written by Allah. When you're in academia and mid-semester, you're like, I'm going to put a hijab on, right? Like, oh, are they going to ostracize me? My reputation is with Allah. When you're thinking, I'm ready to run for office, but this is terrifying. I can run for office once and win. I can run for office 10 times and lose. But I have to make that effort and trust that all of the power is with Allah.
Oh, dang. And you know what's scary? Having to follow that up on stage. But first of all, that was a beautiful answer. So I think everything she just said, I'm going to jump on with a couple of things, which is, at the end of the day, the thing you should fear most is still Allah, honestly. So when you're, and you know what? This is why I wanted you to go first, because the real danger, like physical danger, is faced much more by activists and people working to push our government to do the right thing than the people in government. That's one. But the second is, that's not to say there isn't stress and fear and risk that goes into the work that I do, because running for office is a very public thing. You know, governing is very public, and one thing everyone in our community cares a lot about is reputation, and it's going to be attacked. But the thing that I found has always kept me grounded is, as scary as all that is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is much more merciful, but also much scarier. You know, if inshallah, when you guys all get elected, you're going to be in situations where you need to decide how to vote on something. And there's one path that's going to lead you to a lot closer to the position you want one day, and one path that'll lead you further away, but is the right thing to do. And as scary as failure looks, doing the wrong thing and then knowing you have to answer for it on the day of judgment, that one, you'll find that as long as you spent enough time in the masjid growing up, you'll find yourself knowing that you just can't go down that path. Now, that won't be every time, and you will falter sometimes, and you need to give yourself that grace to do better. But on top of that, the other thing I'll say as well is that you'd be surprised how much more protected you are than you realize. What I mean by that is, I think a lot of people who aren't in politics assume it is so bad to be Muslim that you just can't be associated with the community. And I'm really glad to say, and I think through a lot of the work that CARE and people like Zahra and many others have done, that's not the case in our politics these days. Yes, there are some issues that are still really, really, really controversial, like Palestine, right? But you are going to do much better in politics if you have a community behind you than you will if you are alone. And I think there are so many case examples of people that have left our community behind thinking it would help them politically, only to fail most of the time. I mean, can you name one Muslim politician right now who left the community behind and is successful? Most likely you can't. You can't think of one. But you can think of many people who are in politics who have stuck by the community. And the way that politics works is you don't get elected on your own. You don't govern on your own. You don't do anything on your own. You're doing it on behalf of a community, and you're doing it with the support of that community. And so as long as you stay by your people, you are going to be much safer. And so, and I'll say a third thing, which is Canary Mission is not that bad. I don't know why everyone gets so scared of it. Like, Wallah al-Azim, I'm proud of my Canary Mission profile. Like, yeah, and they have a good photo of me on it. Like, honestly, yeah. But I think a lot of work goes into making us more scared so that we don't try and do things and then realize we can do them and no one can stop us. You can continue to fight for our brothers and sisters across the world, especially in Palestine, and you will not face nearly the amount of career ramifications that I think other people try and paint is going to happen, because they want us to think we can't do these things. They want us to leave our community behind. They want us to divide amongst ourselves, because then we're less powerful. And so if you want to be more powerful, stick by the community and stick by your people.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That was awesome. I would say that for me, it's been really important to use, even when I was a grad student, to use my position that I have to then help my community on campus, right? So like starting locally, even at UC Santa Cruz, we didn't have a proper prayer space on campus. And I was lucky enough that I worked for the Student Success Equity Research Center as a grad student, and I had that direct connection with the admin on campus, which the undergrads didn't, right? So when the activists on campus were like demanding, you know, then I could be like sitting at the table with the admin and be like, hey, you should actually listen to them, right? Or here's the research to back up what the activists are saying, right? And here's like the belongingness research that would say that a meditation space on campus would actually benefit all religious students, right? So for me, it's really important to also, you know, like I think for a long time I shied away from my Muslim identity, you know, growing up post 9/11, but alhamdulillah, throughout grad school and, you know, in my career, I found it's one of the most fulfilling parts of my life is to be able to use my positions of power to advance the Muslim community in some way, whether it's, you know, like continuing to advocate for that prayer space, you know, continuing to do research around that area so that the issue doesn't drop, right? That admin are held accountable and the school is held accountable, and that, you know, religious freedom is also, you know, taking place on college campuses.
All right, thank you guys so much. We hope that you guys were able to learn about the different career paths in social science and law. If you have any other questions, you can email it to youth@mcabayarea.org, and then we'll forward it to them. And then please give them a round of applause. Thank you. And then there's also samosa and chai in the back if there's any left. And then you guys could come and ask some questions personally if you want. Thank you.